Hi everyone, welcome back to today's poem. So every week I'm taking through a different popular poem from the GCSE syllabus. So today's poem is The Charge of the Light Brigade by Tennyson. So, got a bit of context for you. Context is really important in this poem. It's important for every poem, but particularly there's a few things you definitely need to know in order for this poem to make sense. So it was written in 1854 and it was inspired by a newspaper report which is about a battle called the Battle of Balaclava, and this was part of the Crimean War. And this was significant, particularly because the Crimean War was one of the first wars that newspapers, journalists were actually able to widely report on what was going on in the wars and actually circulate the news to people in a kind of mass production way. So Tennyson read a newspaper report about this battle, and the incident in the Battle of Balaclava, it refers to an incident where an order was given but was misunderstood, and 600 cavalry soldiers thought they had been told to charge straight into a valley, and that meant going straight into the Russian line of fire. So they misheard it, that wasn't what they were told to do. They thought that was their command, so they all rushed in, and not surprisingly, there was a slaughter, 150 of them killed, 120 wounded. And Tennyson obviously read about this in the paper and wrote Charge of the Light Brigade to tell the story of these soldiers. So even though it, happened because of a mistake, it was, essentially, a mess made by the British Army. Tennyson kind of twists it and turns it into something very dramatic and heroic, honouring these men who died in the Charge of the Light Brigade. So that is just a example from the newspaper of how widely reported this story was. So let's think about the form of the poem then. So in this poem, and you will see this really clearly in a moment when we go to look at actual examples from the poem, but it has what we call a falling rhythm in the poem. Or if you want to start getting really technical with scansion, which you don't necessarily have to, but a dactyl and a trochee, and I will explain a bit more when I've got an example from the poem. But both of those, a dactyl and a trochee, it means that the stress falls on the first syllable in a line. So you'll see in a minute when it goes in of half a league, they dactyls. Okay, you've got one stressed and then two unstressed syllables. So stress is always on the first beat. That's the main thing to remember with the dactyl and trochee, and it makes that very immense, very powerful impact when Tennyson is writing. The rhyme scheme is a little bit all over the place. Lines do rhyme. There is a kind of pattern, but it's not a regular pattern. And it seems to be perhaps when Tennyson is getting swept up in a particular emotion or describing a particular scene, he starts rhyming, then it breaks. So it's not particularly regular. The same with the stanza lengths. Again, you'll see this visually in a moment when I go through the poem, but the stanzas are not all of the same length. And it uses as well a lot of monosyllabic lines. Makes it very powerful and very dramatic. So, looking at the structure of the poem then. So the poem is telling a story of what happened to these soldiers, and it is written obviously in the past tense because Tennyson is reading the newspaper report, relating it back. Third person narrative. He's interestingly chosen not to write this as one of the soldiers. He writes this as this kind of overseeing person, this third person telling us what happened, telling us how to think, how to respond to this. And we start in the middle of the action. So what I mean by that, we don't see any commands being given. They've already started the Charge of the Light Brigade when the poem begins. And the technical term for that in English is saying in medias res, means starting in the middle. And it kind of thrusts us straight into the action. He uses a lot of strategic repetition in this poem, including the refrain as well of the rode the 600. So lots and lots of repetition. We keep coming back to the same ideas. It makes it sound very powerful, very dramatic, reminding us about these men who, in Tennyson's view, sacrificed themselves. So let's start having a look at the poem then. So our introduction, we've got 3 here with half a league, and here hopefully this is where you can start to hear half a league, half a league, half a league, onward. So that's where we've got the dactyls here, and then a trochee here, stressed, and then an unstressed. You might have heard of iambic, so it's the opposite of iambic. Iambic is the stress on the second syllable, with a dactyl and a trochee, it's on the first. So as I say, it makes it very, very powerful to begin with. So it's a really, really bold, really dramatic opening. And again, these monosyllabic words as well, half a league, really emphasises that power. It's the power of, all these horses charging into the Russian line of fire. And we've got, obviously, personification, the Valley of Death, as well, making it sound, as if they're really directly riding straight to their death. The Valley of Death, this is something they're not going to come back up from. And this frequent repetition of the 600. And we don't know who's speaking here, he said. But again, we've got the imperatives: forward, charge for the guns, dramatic. There's no sense, here of it being, mistake and uncertainty. Tennyson makes it sound like it was very, very deliberate when these men followed this command. And the refrain here: into the Valley of Death rode the 600. So let's have a look at the next part of the poem. So again, we've got this voice here, we don't know whose voice, the soldier's voice, forward to the Light Brigade, but very simple, very direct. We've got rhetorical question as well, with was there a man dismayed? With it, again, these really, really bold, dramatic sentences being used. Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. So even though they knew it was a mistake, they kept going. Blundered, they kept going. Because theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do or die. And I think here as well, this is a great example of where, with the rhyme scheme, Tennyson's rhyme scheme, he puts these three lines together. They have to rhyme because he's getting so caught up in their emotion. And again, that powerful three as well, that we know in English, three is a very, very powerful number. The repetition here. It doesn't matter, it's not up to them to question things, but to do and die. It was just their decision. They were given an order. They were very noble, very brave. They just went with it. And then again, that refrain: into the Valley of Death rode the 600. So always coming back to that idea. The next bit, I love this bit of the poem: the cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them. When I'm teaching it in class, I find it very hard if I'm reading this bit not to get all dramatic with hand gestures as well, to try and show where the cannons are coming from. Again, three. Notice we've got three there. And the pattern, the repetition as well. And the direction, the right of them, the left of them, front of them, helping us really, really picture what's going on. And we've got volleyed and thundered as well. The use of powerful verbs there. Again, notice the three: volleyed, thundered, stormed at, with that. And the alliteration here: stormed at with shot and shell. Again, helping us picture kind of these things whistling past them as well. The onslaught that these men are facing. So this poem, is so rich in these devices to help you visualise and to help you hear what's going on. And we've got, the adverb of boldly, they rode on well. And again, with the dactyl there, boldly, the power associated with that word. And then the jaws of death, so again personifying death. The jaws of death is snatching them, swallowing them up, and the mouth of hell as well. So again, this really intense personification being used throughout the poem. And again, back to our refrain: rode the 600. We're never forgetting how many of them there are, the scale of this tragedy that Tennyson wants to convey to us. And then we have the next bit. Again, more powerful verbs, more repetition. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in the air. Notice how strong, how much impact it has using the dactyls there. And again, we can imagine, flashed. We've got onomatopoeia going on in that word as well. We can imagine all the swords going here, there, and everywhere. Everywhere we turn around, the swords going, the gunners going, and charging the army. Bold, powerful words. It also refers to all the world wondered as well. So switching the focus a little bit from what is going on in the actual action of the charge, switching it as well to the world wandering as well. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke. So again, really intense, really powerful verbs. And Cossack and Russian reeled from the sabre stroke. Look at that sibilance there. Sabre stroke, shattered and sundered, capturing all the action. And here our refrain changes. because he's telling the story. Then they rode back, but not the 600. So again, repetition there on the not. So it's changed our refrain up here. And then referring back again, cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind of them, volleyed and thundered. Again, notice the speed, the pace in those lines. More alliteration in horse and hero. And they that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. You know, they powered on with this. All that was left of them, left of 600. So again, wants us to visualise, you know, this basically a decimated army coming back from this powerful charge. And then our final stanza. So things change up here again. We've left the battlefield. We left all the immediate action. And again, we get another lovely rhetorical question. When can their glory fade? So we can think about the connotations, you know, these men, the glory. You get glory when you've done something really brave and intense. These men, you know, it was a mistake. These men blundered. Someone somewhere misunderstood an instruction and they followed it wrongly. But Tennyson has kind of glossed over that fact in history with the language that he's chosen and the way that he's portraying these men. Can you the wild charge, the metaphor there of the wild charge? They were like animals moving through. And again, alliteration and world wondered, kind of capturing the world wondered. We weren't shocked and horrified. We wondered because these men were so amazing. The world was so captivated by the brave things that these men did. And our final thing then, honour the charge. So it's an imperative. Tennyson is talking to us now. He's telling us as the reader, we must honour the charge that they made, honour the Light Brigade. And then finishing again with the 600, the noble 600. So it's a brilliant poem in terms of devices, in terms of sound. It's very, very visual. There is so much, when you're analysing for your language form and structure, this poem is a gift. You know, there's so many different things you can talk about. But obviously at the same time, when we look at it with the context, we can kind of see that Tennyson's kind of telling a bit of a lie here about what happened to these men. And that's, you know, when you look at it in the context of war poetry and you start looking at the First World War, you know, and why men had these romantic notions about what war was like. It was from poems like this, from Tennyson's poem, Charge of the Light Brigade. Men thought in World War I they were going off to something like this and they were going to be, you know, glorious. Tennyson was going to write poems about how amazing they all were. And obviously they found it wasn't like that at all, and I think the real Charge of the Light Brigade was not glorious. It was nowhere near as sort of beautiful and dramatic as Tennyson makes it sound. So I hope that has helped you a bit with this poem and given you some ideas to go away with and start analysing. I will see you soon.